Hello, BookTube. We're continuing with Dunetube 2019, where myself and a few other booktubers are reading the novels of Dune by Frank Herbert. One novel a month from July until December. Uh, and I might want to change up the frequency of that just a bit myself on this channel. But unlike my other co-participants, I am doing an actual read along. I'm not doing just a summary video every month. I'm doing a read along in every week, and we are reading my favorite of all the Dune novels, God Emperor of Dune. This is the very pretty new Ace paperbacks, and as you can see on the cover, there's forest, right? There's forest everywhere, except for a little patch of sand and a giant tower under the two moons of Dune. And this is a story that leaps forward in time from the Children of Dune, the third book that we read, leaps forward 3,500 years, and yet stars one of the same characters. Leto Atreides, the son of Paul Muad'Dib, has accepted onto his skin the sand trout, which are the larval vector of the enormous sandworms that once dominated the world of Dune when it was a desert planet. And those sand trout have blended with the spice saturation in his body and become a kind of armor, and given him super speed, super strength, enormous physical abilities, and also enhanced mental abilities. And that is the Leto that we see at the end of Children of Dune, running along the sand dunes endlessly in order to tire himself out, and it doesn't work because the sand trout are already transforming him into a superhuman being. 3,500 years later, in God Emperor of Dune, Leto is well along the way to transforming into a kind of sandworm. He is a grotesque feature. He has some relatively human features up in his front sections, relatively normal arms and hands, the remnant of a face, but most of his body is meters long, meters wide, an enormous thing that he needs a suspensor cart to move. And his legs, his feet, have migrated back along the length of his body and basically become vestigial flippers. His body manufactures spice that he needs to live. And he is the kind of all-encompassing religious and military tyrant that even Paul Muad'Dib and his legions of fanatical Fremen warriors never dreamed of. The God Emperor's rule is absolute. His prescience is so far extending that he and his fanatical army of female warriors called fish speakers are able to anticipate violence and stamp it out in almost all cases. And Leto has a goal, and the goal is not just to be a tyrant or even a god. The goal is the golden path, and that is to stop the swing of the pendulum. It is to enforce upon humanity an endless peace, an endless, featureless peace. No mechanisms, no credit, no cruelty, no minor fiefdoms, no nothing like that. Nothing like that. The only source of exotic appeal anywhere in the Empire is Leto himself. Otherwise, planet after planet after planet after planet, everywhere, is a uniform Leto's peace. Everyone has enough. Everyone has food. Everyone has clothing. Everyone has shelter. Everyone has meaningful work to do. But there is nothing in the way of variation. As we're told in the chapters that we're reading today, basically even the planetary capitals of all these planets in Leto's far-flung empire seem like just big villages. And most of all the rest of it are villages of fairly modest size. We're told, for instance, at one point in these chapters, where it's pointed out the benefits of ruling a walking society. There are no space cars, no skimmers, no ornithopters, no nothing like that. This is a flattening in a way that we are led to believe could only be done by one being coordinating it all across that vast amount of time. a being who's made possible by an alliance with the sand trout, but at a horrible cost, a cost of humanity and also a cost of a few other things that we see hinted at in these chapters. It was said even in Children of Dune, we saw that Paul Muad'Dib, the hero of the novel Dune, had enough prescience to see that this bargain was possible and that he might do it, and he was afraid. He didn't do it. Leto makes that bargain, and we meet him in this book when he is no longer human and has been presiding over his galactic empire for millennia. There are a couple of common threads that string throughout that connect the older Dune books with this Dune book. The Spacing Guild, for instance, whose ships make the Empire possible by making faster than light interstellar travel possible. The Spacing Guild still exists. Their guild navigators need the spice, which Leto has vast supplies of. He has storehouses of spice. Far more. Spice is not made on Dune anymore. It's manufactured in his body, but otherwise no. He has vast storehouses of spice that he doles out. Other organizations, the Bene Tleilaxu, the planet of Ix, the Bene Gesserit, of course, have minor stockpiles of their own, but they need to plead with him every 10 years for their spice allotment. They couldn't make do on their own, and he knows that, and that is the coin by which he runs the realm. But all of those entities are still around. We knew them in the first 3 Dune books, but they all hate him, as obviously he would. His fanatical Amazon warriors, the fish speakers, keep ruthless control, physical control over the Empire, and they worship him. He has a large group of courtiers who also worship him. He is a god as well as a tyrant. And foremost among the courtiers, his major domo is a man named Monio, who is a descendant of the Atreides, and he's one of our major characters. And he worships Leto, also fears him, and also, to a limited extent anyway, understands him. And there's a lot going on. Frank Herbert shows the skill that he has in building this world by the fact that there aren't any real inconvenient feeling info dumps. He uses all kinds of methods to bring us up to speed. All kinds. Not just Leto himself, who is prone to waxing on about his life and his immortality, but also reports from the Bene Gesserit, characters referring to each other, and one other great expositional device, which is Duncan Idaho. The swordmaster and bravo from the novel Dune, who we see killed defending Paul and his mother, Lady Jessica. It turns out, as we've seen in the second and third Dune books, that the Bene Tleilaxu in their axolotl tanks have preserved the cells of Duncan Idaho and are able to produce a Gola, an exact physical duplicate of Duncan, for Leto. And Duncan is a kind of connection with the past. He's a raw voice of loyalty and honor from the old days of the Atreides. He's also a direct, visceral reminder of Leto's lost humanity. And so Leto allows these duplicates to keep being supplied to him, and they are the captain of his guard. And it's increasingly silly. The guard, mankind has progressed. Duncan Idaho is slower, weaker than any of the fish speakers, but nevertheless, that role is his. And there have been many, many, many Duncans. By the time we get to this book, there have been many of them. And not many of them have died by natural causes. Most of them are killed by Leto. And the reason why is largely the same, because they start to become obsessed with how many previous Duncans there have been and what happened to them. They start to wonder about that. And that, as we're told, as Leto and Monio say over and over again in these chapters, that is the end. When a Duncan starts to become obsessed that way, you had better put in a demand for another Duncan, because that one is not going to live long. They can't. Some of them live 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, but once that germ of an obsession gets to them, that's all there is. And those Duncan Idaho connects us to the previous 3 books in as much a direct way as the God Emperor himself does. They both, in their own different ways, remember Dune. They remember the planet when sandworms roamed everywhere. Leto would like to return it to that. His dream is to eventually mature into a sandworm and then break apart into sand trout who will spread everywhere and reclaim Dune as a desert world. But the thing I want to draw attention to today, what we're seeing here, basically the plot is very simple. There is a gigantic religious festival in the city of On. It happens every 10 years. It's called Sihanouk. And it's where Leto and his courtiers and his guard make a royal peregrination. They make a procession along the road from his keep to the city of On. The city has been built with one purpose only in mind, and that is to view the God Emperor. Terraced viewing platforms to view him. And then there's a ritual, and it lasts for days, and ambassadors from all the major powers and the major houses and the minor houses all come to pay homage to Leto and also to find out what their spice allotment is for the next 10 years. And then when the ceremony is over, there is a peregrination back to the keep. That is the central node of what's going on in this book. And we are told over and over again, Leto mentions over and over again, both in private and to anyone who will listen to him, that he is a god, that his power is absolute, that it's his goal. His goal is both a predator and a teacher, that he is trying to tame humanity and show them new possibilities. The language is of uncontested authority, and yet we see at every step of the way in this book that his not only is his authority contested often, but sometimes successfully, or within a whisker of successfully. He isn't the all-knowing, all-perfect super tyrant that he gives himself out to be, and that all of his dependents seem to think of him as. Certainly not a god. And one of the most evocative ways that we get that underscored in the chapters that we're reading today is that his peregrination is attacked. There's a group of people called face dancers. We saw them in earlier books in the Dune series, who through complex muscular control can take on the physical appearance of someone else. And when Leto's procession is making its way along the road, and he's talking with Monio, who's trotting alongside the royal. Leto has a suspensor car to move his great bulk, and his courtiers just trot alongside it. And Duncan Idaho is there on the road. He is commanding the fish speakers, the guard, in advance of Leto, and Monio has arranged for a petition by a group called the Museum Fremen. There are no real Fremen anymore, of course, because there is no sand anymore. There are no dunes anymore. But Leto keeps a group of what he calls Museum Fremen around to preserve the illusion of the old ways. And Monio knows that a group of them want to petition for something and allows the petition to interrupt Leto on the road. This is in the midst of many discussions. This is a very, very dialogue-heavy book. I love it for that. And Leto, when he sees the Museum Fremen and sees that they're about to present their petition, appears very brusque. He sounds the klaxon on his cart, rolls his cart violently forward, yells at Duncan Idaho to clear them out. He isn't going to hear the petition. And in an instant, it becomes clear why. Because they aren't Museum Fremen, they are all face dancers. And not just face dancers, they have laser weapons, they have knives, they are intent on attacking and killing this procession. Not only everyone else, but also killing Leto. And they aren't just armed that way. They aren't just face dancers who can take anyone's image. Instead, what they're doing is, at once, they all transform into an exact likeness of Duncan Idaho. What no one sees coming, including Leto. He is totally surprised by this. Totally surprised. He does not see this coming. He does not predict it. He is not playing into it out of boredom. He is caught off guard. There are 50 face dancers. They all take on Duncan Idaho's appearance. A cordon of fish speakers immediately closes around the real Duncan Idaho, and Duncan Idaho has the inspired idea to strip his own clothes off. So that the naked Duncan Idaho is the real one. And there there follows a fight, a brief fight on the road. Laser guns are fired, people are killed or wounded. Leto is wounded. There are laser blasts that puncture his cart. They don't disable it, but they do punch through the metal rim of it. And when Duncan notices that one of those punctures is right at the level of where Leto's body is, he asks, "Are you hurt?" And Leto says, "No, I'm not. My body can absorb laser fire. My body has a tremendous ability to absorb heat without any effect." We're told that when Leto says that, he's lying, that he was actually wounded, just barely at all. And eventually, the good guys win. Eventually, the fish speakers destroy the face dancers, kill them all, at a cost of some of their own dead and some courtiers dead. And Leto orders that there be left no sign of the attack whatsoever. His cart is to be repaired on the spot. And they are going when they come into the city of On. Of course, the Ixians will be watching. The Bene Tleilaxu, the Bene Gesserit, everyone will be watching. They'll look to see if there's any evidence of an attack, and Leto doesn't want them to see any. He wants them to think that the attack has totally failed. And all that happens, and they roll on towards town. But the point I want to underscore before we talk about a couple of other things is that the attack almost does succeed. It comes an inch away from succeeding. Leto is vulnerable to laser fire, and if a laser stroke or 2 or 3 or 10 were to strike him in the right place, he would have certainly died. His face, for instance, or the upper segments of his body, the segments of his body that aren't fully armored sandworm. Which means that if the face dancers had attacked Leto's group in a party of 150 instead of 50, they would probably have succeeded. And God, Emperor of Dune would have ended right there. And that is kind of strange. I remember finding the scene is exciting, but I remember also finding it kind of strange the first time I read it. Not only that Leto doesn't see it coming, but that it so nearly succeeds in working. It gives an alternate view of Leto's reign. It underscores that Leto's reign is a little more iffy than a lot of the conversation would give us to believe. And when his procession rolls into the city, the festival city, Leto, of course, has the ambassador before him. The ambassador, of course, knew everything about the attack, but denies it all. And Leto decides to have the man flogged in public, which we get the impression never happens. He also instructs people, his courtiers and everyone else, to give no explanation. There is no explanation. I'm just going to flog the ambassador and send him on his way. And that is shocking to everyone. But just after the attack, when Leto and his crew are still on the road, they're still recovering, urgent word comes that the Bene Gesserit delegates to the city, two Reverend Mothers, Antiac and Luisial, sent urgent warning that Ix was going to attack Leto in person, that they were going to be that stupid to attack him in person on the road before he gets to the city. And the fish speaker captain that they gave the warning to didn't believe them, and so didn't pass it along. Leto suddenly understands that the Sisterhood was trying to do something anyway. They were trying to help him somehow, and that he had been negative towards them for this festival. That starts to change his thinking. They are the very last of the embassies to come and talk to him in the lead up to the festival. And I wanted to read you that section because that meeting moment is so good. It is so good. It is a fantastic illustration of something that is going to become much more important in the next 2 books in the series. Because when you think about the fact that all these things still survive, all these groups and societies still survive, even though Leto has been the sole and only word of power in the whole of the galaxy for 3,500 years, you start to really think about the Bene Gesserit in a different way. They don't seem to survive purely on his sufferance the way, for instance, the Spacing Guild or the Tleilaxu or the world of Ix seem to survive. It seems to be a different kind of survival. It almost seems like a co-starring role, and that is going to become, of course, much more prominent in the next 2 books. But Antiac and Luisuel come with their entourage of sisters, and Luisiel starts to inch closer and closer to the dais on which Leto is reposing. Monio is right there and notices, of course. He fingers the guards to come a little closer, but he needs Leto's permission to do anything explicit. And this Reverend Mother, you're supposed to stay 10 paces away, and she keeps inching closer and closer. And I want to read you that scene because I love it, and it ends with a mother of all one-liners. Luisiol eased herself a bit closer, ignoring the fixity of Monio's attention. Leo smelled it then and almost laughed out loud. Spice essence. They had brought some spice essence. They knew the old stories about sandworms and spice essence, of course. Luisiol carried it. She thought of it as a specific poison for sandworms. That was obvious. The Bene Gesserit records and the oral history agreed on this. The essence shattered the worm, precipitating its dissolution and resulting eventually in sand trout which would produce more sandworm, etc., etc. There is another change in me that you should know about, Leto said. I am not yet sandworm, not fully. Think of me as something closer to a colony creature with sensory alterations. Luisiol's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward a fold in her gown. Monio saw it and looked to Leto for instructions, but Leto only returned the hooded glare of Luisiol's eyes. There have been fads in smells, he said. Luisiol's hand hesitated. Perfumes and essences, he said. I remember them all. Even the cults of the non-smells are mine. People have used underarm sprays and crotch sprays to mask their natural odors. Did you know that? Of course you knew that. Antiac's gaze moved towards Luisiol. Neither woman dared speak. People knew instinctively that their pheromones betrayed them, Leto said. The woman stood immobile. They heard him. Of all his people, Reverend Mothers were best equipped to understand his hidden message. You'd like to mine me for my riches of memory, Leto said, his voice accusing. We are jealous, Lord, Luisiol confessed. You have misread the history of spice essence, Leto said. Sand trout sense it only as water. It was a test, Lord, Antiac said. That is all. You would test me? Blame our curiosity, Lord. I, too, am curious. Put your spice essence on the ledge beside Monio. I will keep it. Slowly, demonstrating by the steadiness of her movements that she intended no attack, Luisiol reached beneath her gown and removed a small vial which glistened with an inner blue radiance. She placed the vial gently on the ledge. Not by any sign did she indicate that she might try something desperate. Truth-sayer indeed, Leto said. She favored him with a faint grimace, which might have been a smile, then withdrew to Antiac's side. Where did you get the spice essence? Leto asked. We bought it from smugglers, Antiac said. There have been no smugglers for almost 2,500 years. Waste not, want not. That is wonderfully done, and that is a glimpse of the long-term thinking that the Bene Gesserit used to be the only source of. In the Dune world, it used to be that the Bene Gesserit were working on plans that looked out for centuries. There have been no smugglers in over 2,500 years. Waste not, want not. Now there are two such nodes of long-term thinking, the Bene Gesserit and Leto himself. And I think that's just fascinating, and I think it's, in a way, a subtle setup for what's coming. And the only other major development in the chapters that we're reading today is a new character. The new ambassador from the planet Ix is named Hui Nori. She is a pure, beautiful, gentle woman who has been sent to be Leto's ambassador, and it takes him a little while to figure out what the Ixians were planning. They have made Hui Nori. They have sculpted her from birth, from conception, to appeal to his lost humanity. Without knowing it. She is not Machiavellian in any sense. She is not scheming. She is not the Bene Gesserit, although she has a slight amount of training from them. Instead, she is pure. And she speaks to the man that Leto never became. She speaks to the grown, masculine adult, the human, that he sacrificed in order to become God Emperor of Dune. And their relationship will be key for the rest of this book. I don't still, after how many times I've read this book, I have a handle on everything else that goes on in here, but I still do not know quite what Herbert was thinking about Hui Nori and what he makes of her. I'd be happy to know what you think. But we're going to wrap things up for that for now there. So we are at let's see here. We are at we finished with Hui Nori followed a young fish speaker guide down the wide ramp, which spiraled into the depths of On. That's where we ended this reading, and next time we're going to read to. There are no chapters in the Dune books, no numbers. So next time we're going to read to the chapter, about 150 more pages. We're going to read to the chapter that starts. Leto and Siona lay all day in the dune shadows, moving only as the sun moved. He taught her how to protect herself under a blanket of sand in the noontime heat. It never grew too warm at the rock level between the dunes. That is where we're going to stop for next time as we continue on with God Emperor of Dune. So I'm going to wrap this up for now because, as you could tell from that background noise, someone is awake now and is going to want to go walkies. But anyway, I'm looking forward to what you have to think about all this, and I will be back. We will continue with God Emperor next time. Thank you, Dune. Thank you, Dune. I said thank you, Dune. Thank you, God Emperor. Thank you, BookTube.